Yeah, LinkedIn is just about ready to let us go live, which is sick. Oh, we can hit it now.
Man,
Boom.
that's so cool. I didn't even know that was a feature on LinkedIn, but I feel like every time we talk, I learn something. So that's tight.
Yeah, looks like our stream health is poor. Not sure what that means. Whatever. Well, we'll give it a go. But we're ready to kick it off, dude.
Right on, man. Well, hey, thanks
Yeah,
for having me today.
absolutely, absolutely. We're live here. This is the first time we've been live, which is really cool. But welcome to the Thought Cloud podcast. Today we have Kelan Bomar, who is currently getting his master's at UC Riverside. And before that, he was at UC San Diego. His focus is engineering, chemical engineering. He's in the life sciences space. He's currently working at Corning. So we're going to dig into his path today. We're going to get to know him a little bit better, how he got to where he is, where he's going, what's he learned along the way. And Kellen, we're really happy to have you on.
Couldn't be happier to be here, Oliver. Oliver and I actually met through the biotech space, sort of his other day job. And Oliver's making a name for himself. He's out there hustling, and I see him, talking to people, networking, meeting people. So I couldn't be happier to be on the podcast today, Oliver. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. I'm glad to have you on. Glad to have you on. Well, let's talk about you. So let's start actually at the undergraduate stage. So UC San Diego, chemical engineering, getting into that. Obviously, knowing where you are now, did you think that you would be where you are now, given studying that track, that chemical engineering track?
Yeah, so when I first started out, I kind of chose chemical engineering just because it was one of the more challenging majors. I wanted to push myself in college. And so I was initially kind of like torn between electrical engineering, computer science, and chemical engineering. So for the first 2 years, I actually was doubling up and taking classes in both fields. Um,
And
Ultimately,
what
I
was
decided.
really quickly, why were you debating between those three? Like, did you have an idea of what each would lead you to, or was it about, hey, if I study a hard degree, it's going to make me look better in the workforce? What were your thoughts going into that?
Sort of all of the above, to be honest with you. My like prior to going to college, I was actually the youngest of five for a single mom, and
Wow.
so money was definitely a priority for me. Just like won't beat around the bush. So when I'm looking at majors, I'm looking at what pays the best, and so that's computer science and chemical engineering, uh, typically top the list. So definitely a factor. I felt safe in choosing and working toward those majors, but additionally, just because they were challenging majors, I knew that employers in other fields may recognize that and see potential in me as a candidate. So those are all sort of things that like crossed my mind while I was like going down that path. But when I was, kind of torn between the two, I wasn't sure which one I wanted to do. Um, I liked aspects of both. I like computer science because it's probably one of the best bases for like becoming an entrepreneur today. I think sales is a great base for entrepreneurship as well. But in terms of technical skills, computer science allows you to sort of, build something and probably
Absolutely.
pretty readily get some investment. So, that was an interesting field for me. Chemical engineering was interesting just because I liked and was good at chemistry and physics. And I felt very rewarded when I would go into those classes and do well, knowing that they were challenging classes and it just kind of naturally fit my skill set. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's funny
and
too because you think about chemical engineering and what you said about computer science. It's really easy to go and start building something and get investment for it. Chemical engineering, I would think quite the opposite, right? I mean, you're
Mhm.
going to have to require a lot of initial capital to get going on whatever research that is and start building that. Whatever you're deciding to build in that space, it costs a lot more to get going. So, did the entrepreneurship path not make as much sense to you at a certain point? Not that it's cut out of the picture now, but just in the sense of what the immediate steps needed to be. Did that play into it at all?
What's funny is your line of reasoning is totally sound, and yet, um, sort of the opposite situation played out. I had an
Really?
idea for like a chemical engineering, like basically like I was trying to validate sort of a hypothesis I had, to be honest with you, and I just liked the science, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep going down this path. Like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like either way, chemical engineering or computer science, like I'll be just fine. So,
Can
and
you
I had
share
an
that
idea.
hypothesis at all, or is that something you want to keep to yourself for now?
Well, it's highly technical. It's probably
Let's get
not
into it.
like what's
Let's
that?
do it. Let's
All
do it.
right, yeah, for sure. Okay, so when I was in like organic chemistry, I had this sort of idea based on like a first principle approach to a new air conditioner design, or just heat transfer, um, or like heat pump design. And essentially, if you um, take a solution of the like right types of chemicals, where all right, so it's gonna get technical. You good? You want me to just dive
I'm
into
on
like,
it.
all
Yeah,
right,
no, I love
jargon?
learning new
Okay.
things.
All right. So there's like a thing called chemical equilibrium in chemistry. It's a pretty well known topic. You learned about it early on. And the idea is that products are continually creating, or like reactants are creating products. And at the same time, products are dissociating to create those same reactants. So you actually have a forward and a reverse reaction going on the molecular level. And the idea is essentially that polar molecules, which are molecules with like a non-uniform electron distribution, um, they react to an electric field in a way that such like the dipoles will line up with the electric field. So you can actually like manipulate molecules, and cause them to line up in certain patterns. So the idea is basically to use these two facts, to manipulate the position, the equilibrium position of a chemical reaction. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. And so, I went so far as, starting to model things in um, like molecular dynamics simulations. Like there's some great open source software available through like national labs and um, other places and like databases that they've put together to help you like understand various parameters that would go into those simulations. So no wet lab work, all like sort of on the computer, but basically just simulating a variety of different types of chemical reactions to see if this effect like held true. And so I worked on it. I hounded professors and had them help me out with the idea, and got pretty far. Ultimately, like all of the chemicals, the chemical reactions that would potentially work are all like extremely hazardous and like not something you would necessarily want in like an air conditioning unit. So for that reason, it was like maybe it's best if kind of park the idea for now and just focus on other pursuits.
Absolutely. Well, so that's really cool. So you were able to say, okay, there's open source software out there. I actually don't need a lot of capital to figure this out, which is awesome. Great. That's entrepreneurship right there, right? How can you do it at a cheap way? And then as far as it goes with manipulating these, interactions between these molecules, figuring out, you said it, you actually broke it down very well, but the idea that you can manipulate them so that you can get what though out of this air conditioning? What was that idea? Is you wanted to make a better heat transfer, or what was the idea?
Yeah, sorry, I actually didn't explain that part in full. So if basically, if you cause a shift in the equilibrium constant, then you're essentially causing a shift in the amount of products and reactants in that solution. And if it's an exothermic or an endothermic reaction, you're going to have an accompanying, um, basically heat transfer event, like an exothermic or endothermic event.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then so you could selectively run these chemicals through an electric field, cause them to give off or take in heat. And then as soon as it leaves the electric field, they would go back to their sort of natural state and there would be another heat transfer event. They would do the reverse. So they would, if they did an exothermic reaction inside the electric field, they would do an endothermic reaction as soon as they left. So it's
Gotcha.
basically forcing a chemical reaction and then just letting it return to its natural state. Yeah. And so you could,
Gotcha.
kind of picture how you would harness that for like an air conditioning unit or a heat transfer device.
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe it's not air conditioning that type of reaction, how you're manipulating it can be most effective. If you're finding it works with hazardous things, maybe there's other things that, it's not air conditioning that this could be applied to. That's really cool. I mean, awesome stuff, dude. And so you were an undergraduate when you were doing that?
I was, yeah. I'm actually still working on the idea for my master's thesis right now as well.
Very cool. Very cool, very cool. And so in order for you to start thinking like that, did you already have sort of this inclination to dig into this field even before that undergraduate, or did you feel like that undergraduate time really sparked this innovative mindset within you about how you can apply these problems to real world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess during high school, I always liked science and I would like read the books very closely, physics, chemistry, whatever, biology. And sometimes, I'd ask myself questions like, how does this apply? Or I don't know. But I think what happened in college was, I don't know if I was exactly watching an experiment unfold or I was reading about a certain type of experiment, but something just clicked when I saw dynamic equilibrium and like how it could be manipulated, for instance, with heat or like by adding like reactants, you could change the equilibrium position. I was just thinking, oh, wow, this is a situation you might be able to harness, right? If you could
Hmm.
have that control and go back and forth, then you could cause, something useful to happen and you would be in control of that.
Absolutely. Very cool. Very, very cool. So, and now you're in your master's and you're working on that as your thesis. Let's go to that really quickly. I know we want to dig into the rest, but how
Sure.
does how does that work into everything else in the sense of, you know, you went into your master's program is strictly engineering now?
It's just a master's in engineering. My focus is actually bioengineering, but
Okay.
they give us leeway with our master's thesis. So I just focused on something I knew and had already put a lot of work into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so how many more years do you have of that? You're close to the end, aren't you?
I'm pretty close. Yeah, I finish in June.
Good deal. Good deal. And have something that you can go and run with?
I don't know about that. We'll see how it all turns out. You never know with science, but in terms of like the degree, I kind of took on this degree for a variety of reasons. I had been out of school for about 3 years, and I didn't want some of my technical abilities to atrophy. But also, I'm in the biotech space, and before that, I was in the med tech space. And I wanted to get a sort of deeper background on um, like biotech, biology, biochemistry, all of those things, because it's relevant to the work I do now. So that was kind of the idea. Is just like, I'm not necessarily like hoping like this is going to be like a big, it's more like night school for me. It's how I
Hmm.
view UCR specifically. It helps my career. Um, in that a lot of the positions, down the road, which, I may want, for promotion or something like that, do ask for like a master's in like a biotech related field. So, um, it's helpful. And I feel like it just improves my chops when I'm talking to customers as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's dig into that time between undergraduate and masters and, get to that point where you are now. You started out, like you said, in medical devices, surgical, a lot of surgical stuff, which I noticed, which was really pretty neat. Why'd you choose that field?
Yeah. So pretty shortly, or no, I would say about junior year, I started looking at opportunities for chemical, like where I could basically run with my chemical engineering degree. And some of the positions were not where I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. I mean, you can. like fight it out for a few select positions in like places you want to be, like San Diego or San Francisco. Um, but in chemical engineering, a lot of the process engineering jobs are, Midwest, Deep South. And I wanted to stick close to, California, where I was born and raised, and where my
Hmm.
network and family are. And so about junior year, I was like looking for opportunities and I was like, started kind of looking into the medical field. Um, and I got interested in like business development for either biotech or for medical devices. And so after I graduated, I started applying very heavily to those types of roles. Um, and my first opportunity was sort of like a clinical specialist role, similar to like clinical engineering, basically synonymous terms. Um,
For
but
those that aren't aware of what clinical engineering is, what is clinical engineering?
so it's not just one role. You could be like actually designing products, or you could be the guy out basically supporting surgeries. So if you are a medical device company and you sell a hospital a big piece of capital equipment like a surgical robotic system or a surgical navigation system or a variety of other types of technologies that are pretty advanced, for legal reasons, you should probably have continual surgeon and resident and hospital training on those devices, because you know, 2 weeks is not enough to necessarily learn the full ins and outs of a surgical robotics system. So what you do is you place like a clinical engineer at that hospital with the system. And so every time the system gets used, you get called in for surgery and you go support that surgeon. In addition, you're like tasked with, doing like trainings for the hospital, the residents, the surgeons. Um, but yeah, so as a clinical engineer, you're going to be in the OR helping out in surgeries. I was supporting surgical navigation systems, which are basically imaging systems that allow the surgeon to track their tool relative to a preoperative CT scan that they've turned into a 3D model.
What do you mean track their tools? Like track their tools as they're inside of that body?
Exactly, yeah. So we outfit their tools with special trackers so that, well, there's different ways to do it, but for the most part, the prevailing technology has these infrared cameras, and then on the tools, we outfit them with these reflective spheres that just reflect like infrared very well. And using that, they're able to see where they are on the body relative to some pre-op scans after they do what's called like a registration process, where they match the pre-op scan to the patient in real time. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah, so I was just basically working to support and train surgeons with that technology.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And you found that that was a better route than going into something like process engineering because it allowed you to stay closer to home. And was there any other consideration into that other than it's still highly technical and, it keeps you in the midst of this field that you want to ultimately dig into further? Or how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, so part of it was like, what other opportunity am I going to have to go support like neurosurgeries, right? Like I got to be there as like essentially a consultant for this technology for neurosurgery. Lots of training
Really
involved
cool.
in it. Yeah, it was a really good, cool opportunity. And it was something I was like, I don't want to pass that up because I'm probably never going to have that opportunity again. Um, and yeah, in addition, it kept me around in like the field that I was interested in, like business development and medical technology. It's a pretty good segue into sort of business development positions within those companies. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess all of the above.
Yeah. And did you find that that related much to chemical engineering? Because that's what you studied, right? So did you feel like you were straying off at all? Or did it feel like, no, I've got a good idea and this is still aligning with what I want to ultimately work towards?
There was a lot of learning for sure. I mean, you have to learn like the ins and outs of hospitals, OR protocol, like how to get your equipment like sterilized in the sterilization department. Just navigating these big bureaucratic hospitals as an outside consultant is very challenging. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, I mean, all of that was learning. I was learning about, various types of surgeries. I was primarily supporting spine and brain surgeries. And so there's like probably about 10 different types of surgeries that I needed to be able to support. So you got to kind of understand the workflow for those surgeries. And then as you're on the job, you're also learning about the workflow of specific surgeons because they may do things slightly different than the book, and you want to know how that like fits into your process so you can best support. Um, learning about anatomy. Um, I would say that the ways in which it was related to my engineering degree, I kind of there's not a huge connection, but I would say like understanding the technology very well. Like so it was like very quick and easy for me to understand sort of
How things work.
how
I
that
get what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
how you would
How
design
that
that
piece of
system or how it would
equipment
work.
actually interacts with that. Like you were talking about the infrared sensors, for example,
Yeah,
right? Like things of that nature. That makes perfect sense. So you just had that innate curiosity about those tools so that you could then get in like more passionate about what you're doing. Okay, I'm in this field. I know how this stuff works. I'm qualified, business development. Let's check it out. I'm in a great spot. I want to stay here. That's awesome. And so you worked at a couple different companies working with a couple different devices, if I'm not mistaken. I think one of them I saw was Stryker, but there were two spinal devices, if I'm not mistaken, right?
yeah,
And then, yeah, tell us about that and like maybe some of the different devices that you worked on.
sure. So the first one I started with was this company called Metadynamic, and they at the time were leasing brain lab surgical navigation systems to hospitals. And so when they would lease the systems, you'd go out there with the system, support the surgeries. And so that was spine, brain, and they also did ENT surgeries, so like ear, nose, throat, primarily like for
Hmm.
like sinus surgeries. And I was with them for a little bit, but it was COVID times, and things were challenging like even in the hospital and medical space. And so spine surgeries are for some reason considered elective surgery. Not for some reason, there is valid reasons for it, but spine surgeries are often considered elective surgeries. And so our case volume dropped dramatically. And so I wasn't like really working very much. And that like leads to a feeling of job insecurity. So I got an offer at another company to go support pretty cool technology that this company 70 Surgical had designed. The difference is like it uses like a machine vision registration process. So they actually like in the middle of the surgery, they flash like a series of images on the patient, like as the surgery is happening, like wound, and there's like full exposure. And they're able to register the patient to the pre-op CT that way. It was like much faster, kind of a superior registration process in a lot of ways. So I thought that
Mm.
was a cool technology to, get the opportunity to go support. I was primarily at Stanford, but I also supported like other hospitals on the West Coast too a little bit. They got acquired while I was with them by a company called C-Spine. Um, and then kind of shortly after they got acquired, some people that I worked with in the OR from Stryker, who I'd met, and like we'd worked closely because we supported some of the same surgeons. Kind of proposed like basically a business opportunity to me to join their distributorship and like spearhead a surgical navigation consulting um, sort of wing or aspect to their company. There's a
Interesting.
lot, yeah. So there's a lot of synergies between spinal implants and surgical navigation. Um, Pretty much every like 90% of spine surgeries are going to require surgical navigation. Um, well, require might be too strong of a word. Plenty of people do it freehand, but most modern spine surgeons are going to be using surgical navigation on like 90% of their spine surgeries, um, or at least the types of spine surgeries that require spinal implants.
Interesting.
So yeah, so I partnered with them, wrote up a contract, and we kind of started a new. It was technically under a different. We started a separate LLC, but I was employed by the Stryker distributorship, um, and yeah, it was like it didn't work out exactly as I had hoped. It was like my
Hmm.
first step at like a true entrepreneurship. I would say like endeavor. It was a leap of faith. I was able to get Stanford on board. Got them to
And
contract with our
really
company.
quickly, Kellen, back up for us for a second. So, what were your goals going into that? What were your expectations of what this would bring you, so that you could, you know, I don't know, take it to its maximum potential?
Yeah. So we had discussed like they were bringing on some business. I was pretty confident I could bring on some business. So between the two of us, it was a sizable chunk of revenue that we could bring together, and like financially, it was like made sense. There was some other tactics, and like I wrote out a full business plan before I presented with them, and then I like gave them like my expected comp plan and all that stuff. But like I don't want to dive too deep into like specifics of like what our business strategy was, but
Oh
ultimately
yeah,
they basically were going to bring on some business. I was going to bring on some business, and then at the end of the day, I was the only one who brought on some business. And then like a year into it, or maybe like a couple months into it, um, the business plan that I wrote up was going to leverage the amount of existing clientele that we had in order to hire more people, which would also expand the amount of clients we had. So it kind of required the additional business to be truly successful. And I felt like I was, no farther ahead than I was previously. I had like a contract at Stanford still. I was basically doing the same things. I was also doing business development, trying to get new contracts and all that stuff. But um, I felt like it wasn't moving as fast as it could or in the right direction. Um, and so they gave me the opportunity to, add to my docket, like jumping onto the spine implant team. So then I learned about, spinal implants and sort of the business development. And from that perspective, so I was doing both business development for this new company we put together and,
so you're working
supporting.
double time.
I was working a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the spine implant job in itself was a pretty tremendous amount of work. Like those guys, man, like they probably work like 80 to 100 hours a week, like no joke,
Wow.
on call 24/7, 80 to 100 hours a week. Some of them make $1 million a year, but
Hmm.
they work their asses off. And like to make a
Yeah.
million dollars a year, you got to stay in it for a long time. And like 80 to 100 hours a week for 5 years is like, man, that's hardcore. That is not easy. That's like grabbing onto an electric fence and like seeing how long it takes you to like jump
Ye-
off, right? Yeah, like that's
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. And they're
I
working that
decided
hard. They're working that long because you said they're always on call, right? So they're
they're
always
on
dealing with,
call.
yeah, they
They're
have to go into that operating room, right? I
yeah.
know a couple of gals like that with pacemaker devices, and they work
Mm,
their tails off, and they've been working their tails off for decades, and they do well, right? But
yeah.
I mean, they don't know when their weekend's going to be a weekend, or if their trip is going to even make sense in their schedule, or Christmas dinner, et cetera, et cetera. So it gets crazy over there in that space for sure with those medical devices being on call 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week. You get paid for it, but you work for it. That's dang sure.
Yeah. So, that was actually kind of one of the original areas I targeted was spine implants when I very first was like back in junior year of high school. And then I finally kind of made it there and I was on like, I was working at Stanford on like with a good company Stryker and it was like spine implants. It was 80 to 100 hours a week and I was like looking at my future and I was like maybe this isn't really what I wanted. I'm glad I made it.
Yeah.
I worked hard to get here, but I don't think I'm going to try my hand like more in like the biotech space. It's a bit different, better work-life balance, less like stress, right? When you're working that much and you're in hospitals that are already like super stressful environments. I mean, they're like literally life or death surgeries and everyone's
Right.
on edge. Like can be a pretty tough workplace. So biotech doesn't have a lot of those same stresses. And I also just I really like working with scientists. I mean, doctors are scientists as well, and sometimes they're have a PhD and an MD. But
Hmm.
I like the lab scientists. I've always just like gotten along very well with them, and I feel like we just click supernaturally. So um, yeah, came over to this space. It's been great. Corning is a good company in this space, and I've enjoyed
Great
myself here
company in
for
this
sure.
space. Yeah, great company in this space. And so for you, that biotech transition, what made that stand out before you knew the work life balance was great, before you knew you liked talking to scientists, unless you already did perhaps, but what stood out to you to say, this is maybe more the speed I want to be, this is the area I want to live in?
Yeah, so I like talking about the science and the technical details of a product because I'm an engineer at heart, right?
Right.
I'm interested, fascinated in the technology and how it's going to help people. And you get that to some extent in med tech, but like you explain the surgical navigation system to the doctor like one time, the first time they're interested, and then like the rest of the time you're kind of supporting them in those surgeries, and it's less of a conversation about it. Other types of it's a different dynamic. So I already knew, I did know to answer your question, I did know that I like talking to scientists. A lot of my best friends are engineers, scientists. So I think that all those factors kind of led me to think like, oh, this is probably a good choice for me, a good fit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Getting back to that, core root of that chemical engineering path initially. And so your master's program, did you start that prior to joining Corning or did you start it during your time there?
Just prior to joining.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good
So
deal.
it
So then how did that all unfold? Did you think that the job was, oh, maybe not, I'm in my master's, we'll see what happens? Or was that the intention? Hey, I'm going to actually do both.
it was the intention to do both. I didn't know I would land at Corning. I'm very thankful I did, but essentially I was looking to target the biotech industry. I thought I could get in, but I still wanted to improve my like deeper understanding of things, just to help me on day to day on the job. Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I don't think so. I mean, some people do it. Some people can do both. It's a lot of work. It's still a lot of work, but you're doing what you love, which is great. So in this time now in your master's program, you're working on that thesis that you described earlier. What have you taken away from this master's program that's allowed you to dig into your job more and actually maybe see more about the space that you're working in, this biotech space? And how does that change maybe your trajectory going into the future?
yeah, that's a good question. So I've taken a variety of classes that are pretty applicable. Like right now, I'm in uh, like modeling physiological systems. Um, this talks about all of these different processes that happen in the body, and like you're modeling them mathematically, but at the same time, you're learning more about sort of what your scientists and your engineers are doing on their end, um, that you're talking with on a daily basis, and working to ultimately persuade to come and work with your company as opposed to a competitor or something like that. Um, in addition, like I've taken a couple of classes on like sort of the state of the art in the biotech industry. And so it gave me a much deeper understanding of like current trends. Like I see current trends because I talk to so many people like in different labs and I kind of get an idea. But it was nice to have it sort of concretely laid out of like these are the hot spots for research right now, and
Yeah,
like why it's important and what type of research they're doing.
absolutely. Absolutely. So for people that would want to pursue masters and also get into this space, so we can keep it focused on your space because that's what you know. What would you suggest them do what you've done here, or do you think, hey, do one then the other? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess it depends what their goals are. For me, like at this stage, there's always a value to work experience and there's a value to education. And I think that work experience where I am right now is it slightly outweighs the value of the education. So but I don't want to stop my education. And there's opportunities that you can get from education. So I did it part time. And that's allowed me to continue working, continue gaining work experience while at the same time furthering my education. So um, it depends on what your goals are. Like, I think
Yeah,
after I finish this program, I'm looking at MBAs. Um, and I'm going to continue to, further my education while I'm working as well there.
definitely, definitely, definitely. So this sales role, each time that you're talking to that client, you get to say to them, you get to say all of the ins and outs about how this device is working or how this product is working. So you get to have that geek out moment, right?
More so than previous roles.
More
And
so than
like,
previous roles.
so my
And
job,
so,
it's
yeah,
kind
go
of
on, go on.
multifaceted. Your audience, they probably, if they're in college still, a lot of them haven't had a ton of experience maybe in business or like sales roles. So I think it's worth talking about like the breadth of sales roles and like why they're potentially an interesting path to pursue.
Yeah,
Um,
let's jump into it.
Yeah. So like you can be in a sales role and be in the OR, right? And be a technical expert on your product. Like you can be a salesperson and well, there's like gradation, there's like a gradient to this thing, but you can be technical and be a salesperson. And there's a lot of nice perks that come with sales positions. So in my current role, I do a little bit of channel management and I do a little bit of direct sales. It's kind of a mix of the two. I have to handle both. Um, Ultimately, we don't sell our product directly, right? So we sell it through our distribution companies, but I'm responsible for the end all like number in my territory. So I need to promote sales, promote their ability to sell, but also, if I know that there's like certain big clients that are like interested or potentially good targets, I'll just go out there myself and, call them or spark up a conversation with them, try and take them out to lunch, whatever it may be, so that I can, put our hat in the ring for that new bid or that new business. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I think it's surprising that to think that you could be technically like a sales type role and be in an operating room or be in a lab or be all of these different spaces. Like they're doing a vendor show at NASA next month and you
Wow.
have to get like full security clearance to like get in there, but you're going to be talking to all of the scientists about their projects and like how your technology fits into their process. um,
Yeah. And you got to
so
bring your A game too, because they're going to want to geek out. They're going to want to dig into every little aspect.
yeah, everywhere you go, man. I mean, these places are like where the premier research is going on. You go to a place like, UCSF or Stanford, there's like cutting edge research, and the people you're talking to are very smart and
Yeah.
they're experts in their field. And it's honestly a privilege just to get to talk with all these different experts and just be a part of their process in some capacity.
Absolutely. And I think that could be daunting to some people, right? Like, shoot, here I have to go. I have to be on my A game. I have to talk to these experts. And I think that's actually quite the opposite from what I've noticed, at least in the lab automation space. Like, people love to tell you what they've learned and these exciting new findings. And you get to listen to them and you get to ask these great questions, and people are happy to share. I mean, it's not like, oh, you don't know, like, screw you. People always are happy to share, and it's you don't have to fake it that you whether you know something or not, but being genuinely interested, that's really the most important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Exactly. Like those are my feelings and thoughts, man.
Heck yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, NBA after this, that'd be crazy. That'd be really cool. as far as your trajectory goes, I know that we've talked about it. You started chemical engineering, all that you've explored in that space, going into this, medical devices, surgery, realizing, okay, let's detour a little bit. Let's get closer to this biotech area that I'm interested in. I'm going to further my education so that I can dig into this space more. Now you're thinking MBA as this next step. How do you see that tying this whole picture together for you that you've been just crafting so elegantly?
To be honest with you, I don't know exactly what the future holds. I'm not sure where the MBA would take me. There's a lot of different opportunities that can arise from a top MBA program. Um, they can definitely elevate you into, you know, management type positions faster than you would otherwise get there. I'm targeting pretty strongly your alma mater, Berkeley, because I live right next to Berkeley and it'd be perfect.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's my number one choice, but we'll see if that happens. But yeah, in terms of where I would take it, I'm not entirely sure yet.
Gotcha. Well, there's plenty to be explored there. And as far as biotech and MBA go, I know there's a lot of synergy between them. Um, there's a lot of synergy. We can chat about that at another point, but um, definitely cool. Well, I hope that works out for you. A little hospital of business action. That'd be great. That'd be great. Well, good deal, Kellen. Good deal. I think now, I mean, as far as it goes, you've been full of information. We've kind of gone through this entire all that we wanted to talk about here as far as your path goes, what direction you hope to take, what you've learned. We're going to close it up now with the rapid fire round, and whatever comes to mind, just shoot back.
All right.
But you ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. First question: what's your favorite book?
Oh gosh. Favorite book of all time. The Glass House.
The Glass House by.
I don't have the author's name off the dome. I apologize.
Okay, look it up. Glass House. I don't know the book. I'll have to check it out. All right. Next question: most influential role model.
Oh, have to be like my high school physics professor, Mr. Runyon. He definitely
Okay.
like
Well,
changed my trajectory. It got me into science and engineering. Um,
I
so
love that.
shout
Love
out
that.
Mr.
Well, shout
Runyon.
out to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay, next question. And I'm going to change this one up a little bit because you're not only a student, but you're also in the workforce. But what's the most stressful part about being a student with a job day in and day out?
The workload, balancing the workload. Like this weekend, I got a test coming up tomorrow. I'm gonna take it after work. You're at the end of your day, you're tired, you gotta slog through one more thing. But I still think it's worth it, and it's pretty different than the most of the work I do on a daily basis. Business doesn't require you to solve differential equations or anything like that. So
Right.
it's uh,
Yeah,
it's a nice change of speed, but it is a lot of work.
definitely. Okay, next question for students. What would you say the most meaningful way for students to help each other is?
I think man, best way for students to help each other, like networking, getting to know each other, understanding what their goals are, seeing if there's anyone in their network that can help support them, help them get there. Because your network is very important for landing, your first job, your first couple of jobs, perhaps until you gain some experience. I mean, I wouldn't about it without much of a network, but man, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Hundreds of job applications, and you can probably,
Terrible.
yeah.
That
Um,
hurts. Hearing that, that
it
hurts.
stings, dude. It stings, yeah. But
Man,
yeah, network and just help each other out, help each other get jobs.
absolutely. Absolutely. Next question. What's your biggest hope to accomplish during your time on Earth?
Oh, biggest help to accomplish something. To give back to others more than I've received, I guess. I want to
I
be
love
someone
that.
who's helpful to the world and society.
I love that. I love that. That's perfectly put. Perfectly put. Okay. Next question. Top piece of advice for those who are early in their educational journey. What would you give them?
Stay open minded. Be willing to work very hard for what you want while you're in college. But also like got to build some memories there too. You know, have some fun.
Yeah, have some
Work hard
fun.
to
I
play
love
hard.
it. There you have it. Work hard, play hard. Well, Kellen, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome. We've learned a lot about you. We've learned a lot about your path. You've been full of great advice. And it's just really been a pleasure. I think a lot of people will gain a lot from this. So thank you so much.
Awesome, Oliver. Thank you for having me. It's been great, man. And hopefully we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. I'm going to
Cool.